everyone. My name is Thelma Velez, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Organic Farming Research Foundation's 2025 Farmer-Led Trial Forum. Just a little housekeeping. I'm the Director of Research and Education Programs for the Organic Farming Research Foundation. Very excited to be accompanied by our Research and Education Program Manager, Mary Hathaway, who oversees our Farmer-Led Trial Program, as well as Heather Estrada, who is our senior scientist and also helps all of the farmers with their data collection and their design of their trials. In addition to the OFRF team, we're so lucky to have three farms. It's actually 4 farmers, but from 3 farms that were part of our 2024-2025 cohort. And so we have Lindsay from Trouvaille Farm, Tim and Becky from Colby Farms, and Tiffany from a different chick farm. So thank you all for being here. It's always very exciting, I think, for other farmers interested in this program to hear from those who have gone through the program to learn a little bit more about what it's like. So you'll all have an opportunity to hear from them a little bit later. I'll give a little overview of our presentation today. I'm just going to give some background information about OFRF, the Organic Farming Research Foundation, some of our resources that are available for free for farmers or ag professionals. We'll have Heather review the steps to conducting the farmer-led trials. We'll share a little bit more about our farmer-led trial guide, or Farmer's Guide to On-Farm Research, which everyone should review before applying for this program. We'll have our 3 farmers present, and then Mary will go through the program details for the farmer-led trial. She'll show you what it's like to apply for the program, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So for those of you who have not heard of the Organic Farming Research Foundation, we have been around since 1990. Our mission is to foster the improvement and widespread adoption of organic farming systems. We do this because our goal is to cultivate organic research, make sure that farmers have all of the resources and education that they need. And of course, we continue to advocate and to push for federal policies that will help support the expansion of organic production and the stability of it across the country. We really want to see organic farming as the leading form of agriculture because we know that it supports healthy and resilient people, ecosystems, communities, economies. I usually explain our programming in terms of 3 buckets. So we have our research, education, and our advocacy/policy work. And so from our research, we partner with faculty across the country and different researchers for projects that they're doing. We help get the word out. We also do research on our own. We conduct a survey roughly every 5 to 6 years of farmers across the country. We ask them about their biggest needs and their challenges. We are actually going to launch our 2025 survey this year. It informs basically all of our programming for the coming years. We use that to then develop a lot of free educational resources, and we have our farmer-led trial. So that's part of our research bucket. In education, we have lots of free resources on our website. So someone from the team will be popping in the OFRF website for you to look through. But we have fact sheets, we have free online courses, we have guidebooks, we have lots of resources and tools that people can use. And we also have our new content hub. So we have the Organic Research Hub, where Heather has been pulling together resources from across the country. And she has been using basically all the tools available to her to build a wonderful website where people can type, and you can look by categories, you can look by region, and try to find resources for some of the things that you're looking for. And then in terms of advocacy, we have an amazing policy and programs team that is led by Gordon Merrick. We also have a few staff there that are really working hard to make sure that we have federal programs supporting organic farmers across the country. We also make sure we are connecting researchers with the advocacy world and farmers as well. And so there is a course online communicating with legislators for free for those who want to connect with their legislators and maybe don't know exactly how to go about it. So please feel free to go to our website and download any of our resources, which are available for free for farmers or anyone who's interested. So how did our farmer-led trial program come about? It was actually a baby thought just 4 or 5 years ago, and we wanted to put farmers in the driver's seat of the research questions. A lot of times we would work with researchers and they were developing projects and ideas, and they were reaching out to farmers and saying, hey, can we use your land to trial this project? And that's fantastic. Lots of great research comes out of that. But what we really wanted to do was say, well, farmers have questions. Let's help give them the tools to answer the questions they have. And so that's where this trial program came about. We connected with a few other organizations that are doing similar work, Practical Farmers of Iowa, Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, but none were working specifically with organic and or transitioning to organic farmers, which is basically our primary audience. And so we wanted to make sure that the farmers become the researchers because they are innovators by nature. Every farmer knows that they have been trialing things from the beginning of their farming time. So we will provide some technical support and then a little bit of financial support. It's $1,500. It's really just meant to offset some of the costs of whether it's seeds that you need to buy or a particular tool or something that you may need to execute the trial. But the real benefit comes from the technical assistance that Mary and Heather provide, helping farmers refine their research question, design the experiment, and then prepare to collect the data and then analyze it using statistics to help share that and develop a report. Please visit our website, and then there's a link to the Farmer's Guide to On-Farm Research. That is a very important resource for anyone interested in this program. This is the stars on this map in the US are where our 2024-2025 cohort were located. Our previous cohort was dispersed across different states, and so our goal is to someday have every state have a star or many stars so that we are supporting farmers across the country, truly. I also want to definitely give a big thanks to our funders. So we did receive funding from USDA AMS for the Transition to Organic Partnership Program for the first 3 years of this, and we are currently fundraising to continue the program, as well as funding from farmers advocating for organic through Organic Valley. And so lots of appreciation for our funders because they're the ones who help us be able to execute this great work. This is what the Farmer's Guide looks like. It is on our website, so the link is there in the chat. If you have not seen it before, please do click on that link. In the guide, there are examples, and then there are step-by-step processes to executing an on-farm trial. And with that, I am going to pass it to Heather, who will talk a little bit more about what it means to carry out a trial on your farm.
Awesome. Thank you, Thelma. Good day to everyone. It's nice to see that there's so many people on the call. My name is Heather Estrada, and I am the Senior Research Scientist at OFRF. I'm going to walk you through, really sort of briefly, the process of conducting an on-farm research trial. And as you know, you can consult our Farmer's Guide to conducting on-farm research, which is linked in the chat. That'll give you much more detail. Before I start though, I just want to say this was, as always, a really amazing process to go through with all of our farmers, and I'm super excited for them to be here today and be able to share with you. And I also want to recognize all the hard work that they put into their research because there are many steps to making an on-farm trial successful, and they've all done a really great job. So go to the first slide, please. Thank you. So when starting a research trial, the first step is to come up with a research question. And ideally, this is going to be a question that a farmer researcher, like those who are here to speak to you today, have about a production or a challenge on their farm. A great example of this is our first presenter, Lindsay Klaunig. She came up with the question, how will shade cloth affect fruit set and yield in the seed peppers that she was growing? Lindsay, as she will tell you, like many farmers across the country, has been experiencing, the extremes of heat and drought on her farm, and she thought that perhaps using shade cloth on her seed peppers might help mitigate some of those seasonal stresses. And she also wanted to see, how that would result or how that would affect productivity in her seed peppers. So she developed this very clear question. It focused on a problem that could be addressed with a well-planned research trial and really targeted data collection, and that set her up for success. We'll move to step 2. Thank you. All right, so the next step is really deciding what you want to measure in response to the treatment that you're applying in your research. So when I say treatment, what I mean is anything that is manipulated or changed in order to observe its effect. So with on-farm research, we think things like different crop varieties or different seeding rates or applications of compost. And I think intuitively it makes sense to look at things like yield, crop biomass, things like that. But there's lots of other things that might be valuable to measure. And Tim and Becky Colby were really good examples of that this time. Their research looked at the effect of different cover crops on soil compaction. And as they will explain today, they diligently sampled uh, the soil in their research plots using a tool called a soil penetrometer. And that measured the pressure that it took to penetrate soil in a given column. They also looked at weed pressure as well in their trials. So just another thing that a person could look at. And I also want to mention that the Colbys were very intentional about their data collection, and they spent a lot of time working with the penetrometer beforehand to get an idea of how much time and energy it was going to take to actually pull off the data collection and make sure it was valuable. And so one thing we really try and emphasize for our farmers is just being realistic about data collection and coming up with a plan that's going to allow them to collect really useful information while balancing a busy growing season, because I think our farmers can probably attest to how that those are sort of conflicting things, or they can be. All right, next slide, please. We'll move to step 3, which is choosing an experimental design. And really what this involves is laying out the trial in a way that elevates it sort of beyond an observation or a comparison, which would be pictured on the left-hand side of your screen there. And that helps us sort of confidently say that there isn't or is a treatment effect rather than the outcome just sort of happening by chance. So we do this typically by organizing the treatments into sets of replications, and those replications basically just let us do the test multiple times at the same time. And then we arrange these sets of replications, or we call them blocks, within a field, and that helps us control for things like fertility gradients or soil moisture that vary throughout a field, and things like that. And so something like what is pictured on the right-hand side of your screen there is what we're going for in an on-farm experiment, and it's what we at OFRF really help our farmers with when we provide that technical support for the farmer-led trials. Next slide, please. The next step is choosing your trial location. So figuring out where it's going to go on your farm. The first big thing I think for our farmers to consider is just dedicating land solely to research and understanding that some of these areas are going to be out of production, or they may be out of production, that harvest might be greater or less than what's expected. And other considerations are things like choosing a field based on previous cropping history or access to irrigation, or even choosing to grow inside of a high tunnel or a greenhouse, which is what Tiffany Stanley decided to do in her research project comparing compost formulations on cucumber production. So we're at step 5 now. Thank you. That is to establish or plant the trial and collect the data. And so for this, farmers need, they know where they're going to put it in the field, but they have to sort of figure out how they're going to actually plant the trial. So we need a plot map, we need markings in the field or markers, supplies for collecting data, data sheets to stay organized, and probably most importantly, a data collection schedule, which is what we help farmers in the farmer-led trials come up with as well. What you see here is just a really simplified version of Becky and Tim's data collection schedule, and it just sort of shows when they did field mapping, when they took the initial soil penetrometer measurements, when they established their fall cover crops, and taking different observations, and then doing their final soil penetrometer measurements as well. And the last slide combines 2 of the steps. And they might be the most exciting steps. I'm not sure. We'll let our farmers tell you. Those are analyzing the data and then telling your story. So for the data analysis component, within our farmer-led trials research program, we don't expect our farmer researchers to be statisticians. The guide explains some of the theory and tools that a person could use to analyze their own data, but it's not an expectation. We really take care of the data analysis once the farmers provide us with the data that they've taken. And then we sit down together after the data has been analyzed and look at it and see what it tells us. And so then we take that information along with the farmer researcher notes and observations and figure out how to tell the story of the trial. So here's where the farmer can look at the practical application of their hard work and see what sort of can be learned from the data, how that can be applied to their farm, and then maybe ask some other questions that have come up during the process. So those are the steps. Thanks for letting me share them with you. Today, we're really lucky because we have 3 of our farmer researchers here to talk to us, and I'm going to let them tell their stories now. So I will pass things over to Thelma and she can introduce our first presenter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Heather. That was fantastic. I'm gonna actually pass it to Mary because she works so closely with all of these farmers, and I know that she's going to be able to give a much better introduction to Lindsay than I would. So, Mary, I'm going to pass it to you so that you can introduce our farmers.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for that, Heather, for the walkthrough. Now we're just so excited that the farmers get to share some of their work. And we're going to start with Lindsay Klaunig from Trouvaille Farm, who did some great work. I'll let her start, Lindsay, on explaining a little bit more about your farm and your project with our group here. So with that, I will hand it to you.
Great. I have the next slide. Thanks. I'm Lindsay. I'm in Trouvaille Farm. We're here in southeastern Ohio. So if you picture Ohio and you think of the flat part up north, that's not us. Think more West Virginia. So our 80-acre farm is all hill and holler, and you're either farming down in the bottoms and getting flooded, or you're mid-slope and you're worrying about erosion, or like you can see in this picture, we're farming on the top of the ridge, on a rocky ridge, and you're catching all the wind. Those are the options for siting on our farm. And so I myself have been farming for 20 years. I landed here 8 years ago. We've done 7 seasons growing. I'm a full-time first-generation farmer, and I farm with a farm partner who's the same. So what do we got? My farm partner does, he does like pastured beef mostly and some other livestock. And then my end of it is the annuals. So I'm growing mixed veggies and some flowers. I have a CSA, and we do local wholesale to our little kind of rural college town here. And then my main thing, or what I want to be my main thing and continue to grow, is that we grow seed crops. So these are vegetables and flowers that you would grow for market, but we're growing them for seed, processing it, and then selling it on contract to regional seed companies. And then we also have started some kind of breeding work and adapting a lot of these seeds to our regional climate here. Okay, next. So my question was, how would shade cloth affect fruit set and yield in pepper plants that I'm growing for a seed contract? I thought that the shade cloth would help with seed yields by allowing the plant to set more of the flowers that it might drop in the heat and instead set those into fruit. And so we would start yielding earlier and have a longer season of yields, in contrast to the ones out in the field experiencing more heat that would be dropping fruit. This came up because in the past several years, we've been experiencing, of course, just like breaking records every year for the hottest year. When I first moved here 8 years ago, it's the furthest south I'd lived. I farmed like in the coastal north, like both sides of the country. And so I was like, oh, can I handle this quite? I farmed in Virginia a little bit, and I was like, can I handle it? And there was 9 days above 95. This year we had about 2 months above 95. So that's what we're facing. And I've noticed in that often the pepper plants would flower and then drop flowers without setting fruit. I had researched it a little bit, and apparently most peppers, most annuums anyway, the typical like bell peppers, sweet peppers, and most of our hots, they tend to not be able to set fruit well above 95. I thought giving them a little shade would help them. We've also experienced this with other crops like tomatillos and some cucurbits too. Okay, next. So the plan was I had two 50-foot rows set aside. We divided those into 4 blocks, 8 plots. I think I got that terminology right. We're going to grow some peppers under shade and some just open, like regular. So it's just shade and no shade. That's the only treatment. I set up for the shaded, yeah, so we had, let's see, 2 rows at 50 feet. We split them up so that we could have 4 replications, right? So you can see there, I had them labeled S1 through 4, N1 through 4, so shade, no shade, 1 through 4, right? We randomized how they were set up, right? So you don't just do no shade, shade, no shade, shade, you kind of randomize it. So sometimes they're next to each other. And then I put up shade cloth on the shade guys with just like, spring wire hoops like you do for row cover. And I just got some 35% shade cloth, black shade cloth. I actually had an experience. I don't have a lot of experience doing shade cloth in the field, and we'll talk about that later, why that was kind of a problem. So I would have set it up differently in the future. We'll return to that. Measurements we took were fresh fruit weight, just like basically market crop yields. And then the seed yields, because I then extract the seeds. Oh, and you can see in the picture here, I extract the pith and the seed together. We do a little light ferment, and then we clean it and dry the seed. So we kind of had this fresh seed yield and then a dried seed yield. The reason I was interested between those differences was because sometimes you have plumper seeds than others. So it gives a little bit of an indication if it was like high weight fresh and then low weight dried, that the quality might be a little lower. Anyway. And then we also did some qualitative observations just to see if it affected the marketability of the fruit. Yes. Oh, that was collected twice. We had 2 major harvests. So I was able to kind of wait. Normally I would like maybe harvest a little bit here and there, but I tried to keep it in 2 big harvests in September and October. Okay, next. Here's what we got. Bottom line, I was wrong. Shade cloth did not improve yields. Pretty much across the board, fruit yield was nearly more than double in the shade. Seed yield. Okay, we'll talk about the seed yield fresh, that ratio. The second one's a ratio, but yeah, seed yield per plant, seed yield per bed foot, all lower, much lower. And then the one thing that was interestingly just a little higher, I think not enough to be statistically significant, but interesting because it was a little bit of a reverse trend, was the amount of seed you got per pound of fresh fruit was higher in the shade. But I think it was mostly because the fruit quality. You just didn't get as much fruit. But a plant tends to seem to want to make a certain amount of seed anyway. And so even if it doesn't make as much fruit, it might kind of make the fruits that it has seedier. Anyway. Yeah, there's the results. Okay, let's go back. Let's go to the next one. So some takeaways. Oh, first I'll say in the picture, you can see that's where we're drying them. So I think it's helpful to just see how people sort of label and move the labeling through, because you're not used to doing that as much as a farmer. So really it's just like plant tags and having more little bags and containers than I normally would for harvest to be able to accommodate keeping track of 8 things instead of 1. Anyway, I also use, soccer cones, like soccer practice cones in your plots. Anyway, just a little tip if anyone's doing it with a garden marker, it has become really helpful. Okay, so trial takeaways again. I did not get the results I expected. I'm going to start with the fact that it was a absolute record drought. We were at the epicenter of the worst drought on record in Ohio, not just this area, in all of Ohio. If you looked at the drought maps, it was like a bullseye, and our farm was right at the center. It was horrifying. I've never experienced a year like that in my 20 years. My partner hasn't in his 30. It was absolutely horrifying, not just for the farm, but for wildlife. Buildings were cracking. It was wild. And it was also the hottest on record along with that. So almost no rainfall for the entire growing season, which we're not set up for. We are a climate that is actually one of the highest rainfall in the growing season in the country. We're like almost a rainforest in some ways. And we expect an average of 1 inch a week, and that's what we're set up to expect. So yes, you could call it an outlier, but also I simply expect this to happen going forward, to have years, these outlier years, are we going to become normal? So it was just, so it was kind of like a worst case scenario year, but on the other hand, like, let's go ahead and plan for those, right? Another factor was, again, I didn't know how to use shade cloth in the field very well, especially for a bushy tall crop. I wasn't as familiar with this variety. It's, by the way, a paprika pepper variety called Yaglik from Two Seeds in a Pod, which is a fantastic seed company if anyone's looking for just like really well adapted heirlooms. It's used to be based in West Virginia. It's now in Tallahassee, Florida, but really good company. Two Seeds in a Pot. I'm going to put it in the chat later, but great seeds. And so I had just, like I said, used those little spring hoops and covered it with black shade cloth, like all the way to the ground, which I realized was a bad idea later. I also was, according to the methods I set out in the beginning, I was going to cover any day it was over 90, which was like the whole summer. Because in my head, it would just be like a couple heat waves, but it was just one long heat wave. So in the future, I would only cover when it got more like over 95 or was more extreme. I would use white shade cloth. And then instead of the little spring hoops, I would use like the tall 4-foot, like low tunnel EMT, just to accommodate for the bushiness, because I think we did have some yield loss due to too much shade. I think the black added degrees, which offset the benefit of shade. And then I also think there was a factor of, even though peppers are self-pollinated, they do better and better pollinizing with some insects. And I think I excluded insects. It basically worked as insect netting too. So a lot of lessons learned there, how I would do it differently next time. And I do intend to replicate this. I didn't this year because of course we got record rainfall this year, wettest July on record. So we didn't need that. But we, should we get another hot, dry year like that, I do intend to try again and just use it again for those high heat scenarios. Okay, overall, what was it like to conduct this? It was great. With a year like last year, so many things got cut. So many things we like to do. We do, there's no pumpkin patch, no swimming. Like a lot of things just didn't happen, but this did happen. And it's because I had the support and reminders from Mary and Heather to keep me going. I got it in very late and they were very accommodating, but we did collect the data. I didn't do everything we wanted to do. Germination test results, fruit quality, I didn't do as much, but we did get the basics. And just to be able to prioritize it because it was funded and supported. In addition to, you get a booklet. I don't know if you guys mentioned this earlier. You get a booklet for how to conduct an on-farm trial, which I have used for 2 other trials for different grant projects since, because it's very great. It's very helpful for just how to lay it out and design it. So yeah, I think that's all. So I consider success, even though I was wrong.
That's lovely.
Definitely.
It's not wrong at all. I think so many farmers get very ambitious and they want to collect all the data and try so many things. And it's Mary and Heather's job to kind of say, hey, let's narrow it down, stick to the course that's manageable. And yes, maybe it's not what you were expecting, but that's why you have a hypothesis to see whether or not that's what's going to come about.
I have real quick while we're still just on Lindsay, Joseph had asked just to see the results slide really quickly, and I'm just gonna shuffle there. And Heather, I didn't know if you wanted to give any comment on that real quick while we're still on this one.
Yeah, I don't really have too many comments on it. I think, yeah, I'm not sure if Joseph has any questions. We basically tried to, I guess Lindsay told us that it was important to look at seed yield in terms of both per plant and per bed foot. And we also just kind of threw in that seed yield per pounds of fresh fruit as well for good measure.
Thanks,
Pun
Joseph.
intended.
Yeah, Joseph, if
you
you
can
have
also
other questions, feel free to just put them in the chat.
you can just email me. I'll put it in the chat, or Joseph, you can email me and I'll connect you with Heather. It's been a while since we chatted.
I'll answer
Thanks.
Mark real quick. He asked about germination, or for vigor. Yeah, there was no big difference with germination or vigor. It was pretty similar, at least in this case. So I thought that was interesting too.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. And if you do have any other questions about this trial, please pop them in the chat. We're going to have a really great question and answer session after everybody's been able to present. But thank you, Lindsay. It was such a joy. And I have to say, I learned so much about seeds and your region of the United States just working with you. So thank you again for all your hard work on this. Okay, and without further ado, we will move on to Tim and Becky Colby from Colby Farms. And they're going to talk a little bit about their cover crop trial, trying to get a little reduction in their soil compaction. Tim and Becky, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. So I'm Tim. This is my wife, Becky. We are Colby Farms in Papillion, Nebraska. We're just 10 minutes south of the Omaha area, if you've never heard of Papillion. So a little about our farm. We are taking over land that has been conventionally farmed with corn and soybeans for 30 plus years. So we had our work cut out for us, so to speak. This is stuff that's been pumped full of chemicals, just run over again and again and again. So as we started to take over a 5-acre section of this land, one of the first things we identified was how horribly compacted all of this soil was. Trying to put a spade down in the ground was difficult to just get down 12 inches even though our soil was very black. It was just really, really, really in bad shape. So as we are transitioning from conventional to organic, the first thing we identified is, well, we need to get some cover crops in the ground and start loosening up some of the soil, get some good organic matter back in there as we are making this transition. So then it was like, the question was, well, what cover crop are we going to do? What's going to do best? What's going to help us help break up some of the soil compaction? And then some other things we identified. Well, if we're going to be doing this, what are some other problems we're facing? We saw very quickly after not having corn and soybeans in the field that the weeds just came right back up. They're usually hitting it with pre-emergent. So now that we weren't doing any of that, we saw weeds just taking over very quickly. So then we had kind of some additional questions. What are going to help with weed suppression and then pest resistance too? So I was backing up a little quick on my background. I farmed in Arizona for quite a while. So coming from extreme heat kind of environment where we farmed through the winter, now farming through the summer and not through the winter, really flipped our growing schedule around. And then learning a whole new swath of what kind of pests are we going to face up here, what kind of weeds are going to face. It's completely different. So this was all stuff we were going to kind of try and identify and see what worked. So our hypothesis then, well, let me back up. Research question and then is what was going to be best for soil compaction. We were going to pick 4 different cover crops. And we anticipated that some of our radish varieties were going to outperform some of the other ones in reducing soil compaction, just for the fact that they're going to put down large tubers. As the tubers decompose through the winter, they're going to leave nice channels for water to get down there, pull nutrients up from deeper down, and just really help break up some of that soil. So we were getting away from that traditional tillage. We want to have good cover crop choices for the future. What we're doing right now with our 5-acre section is we are rotating around each growing season. So it's just my wife and I growing intensive vegetable and fruit crops on this land. And we can't grow 5 acres of that by ourselves. That would be a nightmare to try and keep up with it. So we're just doing about a 2-acre block of intense row crops every season. And then in between, we're cover cropping the rest of it just to continue putting nutrients and organic matter back into the soil each year. So we selected this area and we ended up using about probably close to 2 acres on this project, maybe 1.5 acres. And we set it up in 6 blocks, each block containing 10 100-foot rows. So you can see on this kind of picture in the top left here, that goes about 300 feet deep there. So we did kind of how Lindsay was describing how we randomized everything. We had 4 different cover crops. The ones we chose were going to be the rye, the canola, the groundbreaker daikon radish, and a jackhammer radish. So before we planted that, we started this project actually last spring by putting in a control cover crop. We wanted to have a kind of the neutral starting ground for everything to get the most accurate results possible. So we cover cropped that whole area with peas, oats, and vetch. We grew that through the spring, and we mowed it down just before it began to go to seed. We prepped it, just reshaped the rows a little bit, and got it ready for the cover crop, which we planted then in August. It was all completely random, and we had a lot of issues in the very beginning. We ended up with part of our field, kind of the far end of the field from that top left picture. We got about 6.5 inches of rain over a 48-hour period one day, so that washed out a few of our trial rows, but not the whole thing, just a few of them. But that was the point of having such a large area for testing, is we were able to still have plenty of good rows. We used the Agritronics soil penetrometer, which basically looks like a big T, big handles on it, and you push it into the ground, and it kind of has, you can see in the bottom left picture there, it has a little dial on there, almost looks like a fuel gauge. And the harder you have to push, the more the meter goes up into the yellow, into the red. So it just measures the pressure that way. So we tested each row beforehand, during the first cover crop of the peas, oats, and vetch, after we planted, multiple times. Our spreadsheet of data was enormous. So thank you to Heather for analyzing that, because that was a daunting task, I'm sure. So we measured in a zigzag method, so we didn't just go straight down the row. We kind of jumped around across the rows to do that. And you can see in these pictures here, just to show what they are really quick before we move on. The top right picture, you can see my foot next to one of these daikon radishes. So they grew just about as far down in the ground as they did above the ground. So they, even as they were trying to push down, they hit compaction or hard pans, and then they just grew up instead of growing down. That's how bad the soil was. But this was all throughout the daikon radish rows. They germinated extremely well. Both radish rows did. The rye grain that we use, so the rye, it wasn't like a rye you'd harvest or like a rye grass, like a winter rye grass. It was a rye grain, more the rye you would harvest from. That did really well, but the canola, we had really poor germination, and because of the weed pressure, the weeds typically outperformed the canola, unfortunately. So that one didn't do too well. Again, let me go back to our planting method too. We don't have a seed drill. So we broadcasted the seed. We doubled the rate of broadcast that we'd use for a drill, just to ensure good germination. We had a big harrow we drug behind to rake everything in. That's the way we've been cover cropping our fields for the last few years, and we've had great results with it. So we just opted to do it the same way. Okay, you can see down there the middle picture that was in the bottom, that was just a hula hoop. That was kind of how we were evaluating the weed pressure there. So we would take random sections across the rows and collect the weeds and see how the weed pressure did. But most of the time, the cover crop germinated so well, there was almost no weeds in there. Okay, we can go to the next one. Oh. Okay, so the results didn't really tell us a lot, and I think there's a few reasons why. The penetrometer, it showed pretty much the same pounds per square inch across the table from our spring planting to the end of our measurements in the spring of this year. And that's just the statistical data, but I think the reason is there's a few things going on. One, the penetrometer probably wasn't the best tool to measure. I think in hindsight, we should have done more of like a soil like mass, like taken a cubic foot section and measured it beforehand and measured it afterward to see the weight difference, to see if the soil was more loose or more compact. And then the other problem was these daikon radishes did so well that they left these huge channels down there. So as they decompose and we push this penetrometer down, many times with very little pressure, the entire penetrometer would sink all the way down to the handles. So we knew we were doing something right, because suddenly we had all these channels that were getting water and everything really, really deep down. But when you don't get a pressure measurement, it's hard to say, well, here's how much it was reduced, because there was zero sometimes. So it would be interesting to see, if we were to cover crop an entire field area versus just a row, how much that would impact the compaction all around. So you can see kind of on our little chart here from the canola, the jackhammer, our control variable, the rye, and then the ground breaker daikon radish. Depth didn't really change. It was pretty close, within an inch all the way across the board there. Okay. I mentioned the heavy spring precipitation we had that washed out a few of our crops. Overall, I think the two radish varieties we did were the two best choices. The Groundbreaker was one that was a little bit wider diameter radish, a little bit bigger. That one that was next to my foot, that was the Groundbreaker. The Jackhammer was a little bit thinner tuber, but both did extremely well. I would plant both of them again. The rye, the other problem we had is we expected our winter to just winter kill all of our cover crops. It did so with the radish, as you can see here. This is a picture, I think, kind of midwinter as everything was starting to break down. But our rye was very, very resilient. We had a very mild winter here. Very little snow, and what snow we got melted off quickly, so it didn't really kill anything. So as the spring came around, we suddenly had all this rye growing back very, very green very quickly in the very before, I mean, it was still late winter. So that was something I probably wouldn't do again, because then we had to get right on top of it. And then it was this challenge like, well, we still want to be able to measure and get results, but I also don't want this cover crop going to seed. And then suddenly we have weeds all across our field from this cover crop we were trying to measure. Wouldn't do the rye again. And then the canola, the rapeseed, just did really poorly overall, both with weed suppression, crop growth, everything. Possibly could have done better on a seed drill, but yeah. So how will this impact my operation? Like I said, I'd like to cover large swaths of our farm with the radishes. It did really well growing in the fall, grew very quickly, covered a lot of weeds. We had a lot of button weeds out here, a lot of ragweed. I don't know what you call it up here. I've heard of pigweed, a bunch of different names. And areas where we were able to plant those, there was just very, very little weed pressure. So if we can continue keeping our ground covered year to year and not leaving any bare ground throughout the growing season, I think we can really help mitigate the weeds. And then the long-term plan is with our row crops is to establish some sort of permanent raised beds, so we're not just continually tilling up new weed seed, but reusing the same rows, planting cover crops across those rows. And we have a power harrow we're using now to reduce tillage. So instead of tilling vertically, we're tilling more horizontally, mixing the soil instead of creating a bigger hard pan. So we're going to just continue to implement those kind of methods. You can see in that picture right here, this was one of our first growing seasons here. We actually planted Sudan grass, and it grew so quickly we had to get a sickle mower to keep cutting it down because it was growing about 6 feet tall every month and a half. So the good thing there is we were able to keep it from going to seed. Added an unbelievable amount of organic matter to the soil, which it desperately needed. And at winter, we were able to kill it with the winter snow. And yeah, I did great. I would highly recommend that one if you're just looking to add a bunch of organic matter to the soil. Let's see, questions for next time. We want to do more cover crop plantings, see how they impact the pollinator communities too. So that area we did our testing in, because we saw so much water settling down there when it did rain heavily, we are actually designating that area for a pollinator cover crop. We'll be planting dormant planting next month. And just to try and bring more native grasses, flowers in the area, and bring more pollinators to our area too. The farm trial for us was really fun. We learned a lot in the process from a research perspective. Lindsay, I think you mentioned how, you had to separate the seeds in your bag just to keep track of every little different variable in there, where normally that's not something we do as farmers. By randomizing everything, putting seeds in all different rows, it made sense why we had to do that. But yeah, it was a lot more work, a lot of testing, a lot of walking through the fields and dropping penetrometers in the ground. I mean, I think every time we had to do readings, it was, I think it was like 900 readings we had to take every time we did it.
Lots of steps in.
A lot, yeah, yeah. But it was cool, and wish we'd had more variable results. But what we took away the most was more of a visible visible result. You know, we know we improved the soil. We saw the the great amount of holes in the ground from the radishes as they broke down and everything. There were a couple times just walking through the fields, walking across where they broke down, where my foot actually sank in some of these holes. They were so big. But yeah, we are looking forward to doing some additional projects in the future, coming up with some new ideas, and we are extremely grateful for everyone on the team that helped us through the process. Mary for just keeping on top of us and making sure we were getting the readings at the right time, putting together a great schedule for us, and then of course Heather for helping us with all the analysis and just providing great ideas and education throughout the way. It was really fun. Felt like a big team effort on the whole thing. So I would encourage anyone that's thinking about doing one to jump on board, because it was a good time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim and Becky. And yes, big team effort, most of the effort being on y'all. But it was really a joy to learn with you all on this project, and thank you so much for sharing. If anyone has any questions for Tim and Becky on their trial or any of the other farmers, please remember, put it in the chat. We'll have a really nice question and answer session. Thank you both. Great. And now with that, we will move certainly to our last, but definitely not least, farmer presenter. And that will be Tiffany Stanley from A Different Chick Farm, talking about her journey and trying to find a fertilizer she could make on farm. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Tiffany.
Hi, I am Tiffany from A Different Chick Farm. So we actually had a couple ideas to go with on our research project and finalized with this one. We got a little bit late going, so we chose to do a late variety cucumber in one of our greenhouse tunnels to see how the different compost would do compared to our commercial fertilizer. And so that's the one we went with on this project. So a little about us. So our farm is A Different Chick Farm. We are certified organic. We run just under 6 acres in Johnson City, Tennessee. We do our vegetable crops, but we also do orchard trees, and we do flower production, all on our farm. It's just me, my husband, and then we've got a special needs son that helps us also when he's not in school. We have a large focus on our unique pepper varieties. We sell our peppers also, but we do a lot of value added with our pepper products. So we've also got a diverse flock of chickens. So we began with, and that's how we got our name originally from A Different Chick, was because we raised a lot of very odd heirloom expensive chickens, and we don't have those odd heirloom chickens anymore. We just have our heritage breed. So we wanted to, between that and our crop residues, see if we could come up with a fertilizer and a compost that could compare with the fertilizer we are currently using. We have a few farmers markets we do. They have changed a few times, and we do an on-farm CSA also. So the question was, which on-farm compost would match the yield of a commercial fertilizer in cucumbers? So when we looked at this and saw what we were going to do with the chicken manure and the green manure, I really kind of figured that I would be able to get really similar or higher yields with my green fertilizer and my chicken compost rather than the commercial fertilizer. So it's important to us because we really try to do everything on our farm regeneratively. We save our seeds. We try to rebuild our soil, really try to do everything as much on farm. And every year we are able to use less pesticides, less fertilizer. This year we only had to use a spray for aphids in our greenhouse once. So that's all the pesticides we used all year long. So we were very, very happy about that. So the materials and methods. So we had 4 rows and we used Socrates cucumber. So the Socrates cucumber is one of our favorites because it can produce cucumbers in 50-degree temperatures, which is great for us in early spring to get an early start on our cucumbers, and then late so we can get a late crop of cucumbers when nobody else at the market has any. So we used our 12 by 24 greenhouse, randomized the compost treatments across the 4 rows. The first was our chicken manure and pine chips. The second, which was B, was clover, grass clippings, wood shavings, and then crop residues. And then the third one was the Harmony fertilizer that we use. And that's the one we go and buy on a regular basis. So we measured the quantity, yield, fruit weight, and then the harvest schedule. And we also sent our compost recipes to a lab, which was a ward lab, for analysis to see what they said about our compost. So the analysis showed the green manure had significantly lower nutrient availability than the chicken manure recipe, which we kind of figured. We did not see a whole lot of differences between the fruit quantity or the yield. What we did notice, though, was the plant health and then pest susceptibility. So the plants grown with the chicken manure had robust growth, and it actually had a lot less aphid pressure. There were some of the plants that had no aphid pressure, even right beside some of the ones that had high aphid pressure, which was very interesting to me. That being said, I've also noticed that in our fields where we run our chickens through our fields before we plant some of our crops, there's a lot less pressure from bugs and insects, especially on aphids. So we think it's probably the lower nutrient availability and overall reduced plant health, which is why the aphids were kind of sucking the nutrients out of there. But we didn't quite get enough results from it to know for sure. I would really like to be able to have done that one maybe another 4 to 6 weeks, but it was the end of our season and it got too cold to try to keep the greenhouse, and we had damage to our plants, so couldn't continue any further than that. So how this will impact my operation, seeing how the different compost have worked. We're still working on composting items. We definitely bring our crop residues out of our plots, mix them with wood chips, put them back into the plots, and mix some of our chicken compost from their chicken housing in with that also. So I think eventually I will find a recipe that really works for our farm with exactly the nutrients we're looking for. What we also do is, like I said earlier, we rotate our chickens around with fencing on the crops or on the plots we're getting ready to use for the next season, which seems to work really well also. So what I would do differently, so I think what I would do a little bit differently is being able to do this a little bit longer. I think we were kind of in a little bit of a time crunch. I would have liked to have been able to do it a little bit more. It was great that I had the help from the team to kind of direct me, because I had never done anything like this before. And there is information out there, but there's not as much information that I would have liked to see organically. So what questions do I have next? So I would like to see if I can continue this, and especially with the pest resistance and the plant health. Whereas it's great to have a lot of yield to keep your plants alive using organic methods, and to keep them really healthy is very important to us. And I'm sure it is to a lot of farmers out there. So the farm trial really was helpful for me. I learned a lot. I had never done research projects like this before, so it was great to work with the team, having them direct me, kind of show me what I need to do on next steps. Heather doing all the reports was great because I hate numbers. And that is not a strong point for me. So it was great having someone there to be able to help me along and see how the results came about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany. And I'm going to repeat what Matt Jones put in the chat here. No significant differences between commercial fertilizer and self-grown fertilizer is significantly awesome. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing your trial. At this point, we are going to move on to a little bit more about next year's project, but our farmers are going to stick around if they're able for any questions at the end. So please keep on putting your questions in the chat for them all, because like I said, we're going to have a fun question and answer for anything and everything farmer-led trials after I talk about how we can apply to the farmer-led trials program. Hello, my name is Mary Hathaway, and I'm the Research and Education Program Manager with OFRF, and it is my supreme joy to be able to work with all these great farmers and hopefully to work with maybe some of you who are listening on this webinar for our next cohort. Thelma mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that this is a project that was funded through the USDA Transition to Organic Partnership Program. And just a plug, some of these projects are still going on. There's lots of really great resources and mentorship opportunities that have come as a part throughout every single region in the United States. It's this one-time beautiful infusion of cash into trying to really lift up the organic industry and organic farmers. So if you haven't been too plugged in with it yet, I encourage you to look for what's going on in your region with the Transition to Organic Partnership Program while we still have it. So first, our application portal is now open. The applications are open for the 2026 cohort, which will be our third year of doing this wonderful program. The applications are open until December 3rd, so please make sure you get those in before the end of the day on December 3rd to be reviewed. So a lot of our farmers mentioned like when they were doing things, kind of things into the season. The intention of this grant is that the grant cycle is 1 year. That looks different for different farmers in different regions. It also looks different. Like for instance, Tim mentioned that they wanted to have an even playing field, so they had a standard cover crop they put in before they did this penetrometer, kind of makes things, all things being equal. So there are things like that. In general, this is a year. That's when we try to capture it. So consider it being something you can actively trial within a year's time. The grant funds are $1,500. And so this is basically just to kind of cover the expenses, right? Like maybe you need some materials, some inputs, something for the actual marking the trial, or a small piece of equipment, maybe to subsidize a little bit of your time. It's not a lot, we understand that, but the real juice of this is the technical assistance you get from our team here at OFRF. And so that's what we're really hoping the intention is. You're going to walk away from this program with the understanding of how to conduct a trial on your farm. So whatever it is you see out there, you know that it's somewhat reliable and it's something you can build on from season to season to improve your production. And we are there from start to finish to kind of help you build your question. I know Tiffany mentioned that, she kind of had a couple ideas. Everyone comes with a couple ideas, right? You're working with so many different variables on your farm. And so we start with that. How do we frame this question into something that is a research question that's doable and hopefully that will inform your production practices? So from that very start, we'll help kind of talk you through shaping the question, what that's going to look on the farm, making sure that there's replication and randomization in your fields. And then of course, to the part that people really love the help with, which is once the data is collected, we get the data analysis, so we can actually parse and talk through what it is you've seen and done on your farm. Now, that being said, it also does require a lot of commitment from you, the farmer, right? It's marking off a certain piece of your land to do this trial in. It's going and doing different tests or collecting things at different times. It's making sure those markers are out there. It's making sure that every time you harvest, there's different sections. Maybe you're weighing, right? So it definitely is a layer of commitment that has to be met throughout to really see the results of your trial. It also looks like phone calls with me and Heather, which we are great, but sometimes when you're busy, you're like, I gotta talk to these people again. But usually we have a great relationship and we really value the time and the input and the energy, but it is a commitment. And so we always like to remind people that you've got to put that time in to get the results out of it. So who's eligible to apply? So you need to be a farmer or rancher in the US or its territories. The funding is restricted to these regions. Unfortunately, can't fund any projects outside for this program. The farms must be certified organic or in transition to organic. This is a big one. We do ask on the application, which I'm going to walk through quickly, who your certifier is. And if you're in transition, you should have an organic management plan in place. The farm itself, you need to have management capacity, right? So either lease or own the farm so you can make those management decisions of what you're doing for the trial. When we are going through and evaluating the applications, we do give priority for people of color as well as veterans and beginning farmers. Our priority areas. Basically, if you're farming organically, I don't think there's anything you could probably not fall into one of these. But these are kind of the major production challenges that were identified in our last National Organic Research Agenda. And so these are ones that we know are challenges. And so your knowledge, the things that you're trialing, is going to help build on the body of evidence we have about these different things. So it's really wonderful to be able to have this kind of long list of like, here's where some more information is about this. Okay, so if you'll indulge me, I am going to do a quick walkthrough of our application and just show how quick it is, how easy, but to give you a little insider tip on how to answer these questions. So I'm going to try to do this with as few crazy moves as I can. Now, are you guys seeing the application for the Farm-Led Trials program now? Yeah, okay, great. I'm going to make it a little bigger. Maybe I can see it too. Okay, so when you navigate to this page from our website, from OFRF.org, and Heather, maybe you can put in the Farm-Led Trials page again, you will come to a Google form. We tried to make this very straightforward, as simple as possible. You will notice throughout we have linked the Farmer's Guide to Conducting On-Farm Research in there, so please make sure you familiarize yourself with the guide. We do reference it in the application. So we're going to go ahead and just quickly walk through this. Okay, so the first stuff is your basic information. You put your name, please put your full name. If you're going to be working on this with another person or you have another like trial manager that you're working with, farm manager, anything like that, please add them. Whatever your farm name is, I'm just going to put in Banana Hands, where you are, right? And I apologize, I have to put in something because I have to put in these answers or it won't let me proceed. Your email address, your phone number, because we will be talking to you. Your farm website or social media handles. We love checking people out when we do review the applications. If you have something like this, it's always great to see your pictures, great to see that you're in production. And that's something else I should mention with eligibility is the intention of this program is it is for farmers who sell commercially, right? For food or fiber or flowers, they are selling. So they are in production. Your current certification status. So if you are already certified organic or if you're in your 3-year transition period, and then go ahead and put in your certifying agency, right? So if you have, Oregon Tilth or QCS, please include them, right, who they are in there. The next question is, do you own or operate a split operation? If you do, great. If you don't, just go ahead and answer that one, whichever one it is. There are a bunch of farmers who have some land that's certified and some that isn't. We're just curious to see what your production looks like. Next question is demographics. If you're a beginning farmer or rancher, go ahead and click that, as well as if you're a veteran farmer or rancher, click that. And again, we have our rubric available online, and so you can kind of see how that plays out in any prioritization or support from this grant. And then if you or your farming partner who's participating in the project identifies as a person of color. All right, and then we get to a little bit more about your farm. This is really helpful for us. It just paints a picture, right? We're just seeing this paper, we're not seeing you. So please just go ahead and give us a little information about your, how many acres do you have in production? What is your main crops or livestock? I'm a banana hand, so I'm growing a bunch of bananas over here. And how do you sell your products? So again, this is just painting the picture. Should be pretty straightforward and quick questions. The brief description of your farm. If you have a website or anything else, I'm sure you have some canned language, whatever makes sense or wants to share with us kind of what your farm looks like or what you're doing. Very helpful. And then your farming experience, how long you've been farming. Okay, from here we go on to the actual bigger pieces. So it did say next, I'm going into the next part. Again, you'll see the farm trial proposal. We also highlight again the Farmer's Guide to Conducting On-Farm Research. Please check it out. The research priorities. So say, for instance, I'm worried about I want to ask a question about what cover crops work well near my bananas as a ground cover. I would select that. There we go. But, you know, I also am worried about the weeds that are coming up. I can check that too. Check 1, check up to 3. That's great. The next question is, please share up to 3 research questions you're interested in testing on your farm. We do reference the guide here again, but if you have one great question, that's wonderful. We just want to know what you're thinking about, what if there's something you're really trialing. I will note that most everyone, there's a little tweak or change to what they end up asking when we actually get to the trial point. But it all starts with what this is here. And so this is what we're going to see first. So I'd really put those thoughts of like, what is it that I'm interested in learning? What's going to help my production system? What's going to help the soil on my farm? Something like this into here. So any of your thoughts are welcome, up to 3 questions. If you only have 1, that's okay too. But you know, we always play with this question a lot. The next is explain why testing these ideas or questions is important to your farm. Yeah, what impact is it going to make? Why are you worried about this? Is it because you've had a lot of drought and really hot days and you need to figure out how to keep fruit set on your peppers? What's going on here that this will make an impact to your farm? The next question, describe any past observations and or research you may have done on these questions or ideas, as well as any connections with research or extension professionals that may provide you additional support. Some of us have great connections with our extension in our areas or other farmers, or we've read papers or we've looked at something and said this was very interesting. You know, when working, for instance, with different compost recipes. What have you tried so far? What kind of compost are you using right now as a fertilizer? And what have you seen, right? So there's all sorts of different ways you can answer this, but it is nice to know you've had some thought in it, right? This isn't the first time, oh, this just occurred to me and I want to just try it out, right? Like what's some background you can show? Next is, what do you want to compare in your on-farm trial? So for instance, we again put in to see step 1 on the Farmer's Guide. Do you want to see what impact different cover crops have? Do you want to, like, what is it that you actually want to get out of this trial? What do you want to compare? So it could be an input, it could be a practice, etc. Next, we ask, what measurement would you take to help answer your research question? So, you know, with Tim and Becky, they used that penetrometer. They wanted to see like if the soil compaction would change with the different cover crop practices. With Tiffany, hers, you know, was like what the yield was with this different, the different inputs of her different commercial fertilizer and their on-farm compost. And then with Lindsay, it was something different, right? Then maybe she did take yield, but she also took that information about seed quantity because that's what was important for her and her farm. So again, this is kind of getting to that point that like you put some thought into it. There is something of like, okay, because we're going to start rolling the ball with these conversations that you start here in this application. The next question, what do you think are the biggest challenges for you to conduct and successfully complete this trial, and how could you manage these challenges? We know everything's going to be a challenge. You can put weather, you can put labor, time, any of those things, but maybe just give yourself some time to think through what it is, and that can make sure that you know you're prepared to actually participate in the trial program. The next question is, if selected, when would you want to start your trial? This is just us getting an idea of like when that crop, that practice you want to trial would be. It kind of helps us with the general timeline. Next is approximately how long do you think the trial would run? So this one is, you know, when is that season for it? Again, this is fluid, this changes, but it is you putting that initial thought into your project. Next, we have, tell us more about your background or experience in agriculture, education, and research. Yeah, this is like, have you done trials before? Have you done any other research before? What's your educational background with agriculture specifically? So just kind of, again, getting to know you a little bit better and painting the picture for us. And we do ask if you've ever received funding for on-farm research for your farm before. We have had farmers that have participated in the SARE grants in the past or have had trials done on their farm with researchers from a local university. So, you know, it's all out there where some people are brand new to it. Some people have had experience. So again, it's just kind of painting that picture for us. The next question is how much space or land can you use for this trial? Again, you know, just want to make sure you have space available and have thought that through. And then we get to a little more eligibility questions of the lease, own, or other. So just let us know you can manage that piece of property, that land. And then how did you hear about this program? We want to make sure we're spreading the word. So let us know where you heard about us. And then finally, we have just a kind of a commitment check here of like, these are the things I know I can do. I can work with OFRF. I can set aside the land. I'm okay with talking with this OFRF staff through the start to finish of this project. I'll make sure I have meetings with OFRF. We do meet with you by Zoom quite frequently. Collect and record data. Submit your collected data so we can actually see it and help you analyze it. And then share your findings through a final report and presentations like this. And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but all the final reports that have been completed from the first cohort year, from this cohort with Tiffany and Tim and Lindsay, those are all available on our website. They're really wonderful to get to see the actual final reports for them. And then at this point, you are at the last question we really ask you, which is, I've seen this farmer's guide that Mary keeps on screaming and yelling and underlying, and I've read the steps. So please take a minute to review because it is important. And so with that, what you would do if you don't have any other questions is you'd go ahead and submit. And so you do get a copy of your responses, and that is it. We tried to keep it short and sweet. I'm going to go back to my presentation now. I have the website up here. This is the link if anybody's looking for it on farmer-led trials. And then I'm just going to do one more slide before we get to questions. There is some help available if you still have questions after this webinar or want to reach out. You can schedule a quick one-on-one consultation with me through a Zoom link on a calendar link that's on our website. You can check that out. We also have a frequently asked questions section on our website that does help with the applications and general questions about the program. There's a rubric so you can see how our reviewers are evaluating the applications. And again, one last time, I have to say it, please check out that Farmer's Guide to Conducting On-Farm Research. We will also be coming out with a version in Spanish soon. So with that, I invite you all to apply, to check out the guide, and I want to give one last huge thank you to our farmers before we get into questions. Okay, I'm going to go into our question box here. I know at the very top we had one, and I wanted to make sure I didn't lose it.
It was from Amanda. Can I trial different growing methods for the same crop on my farm? Is that the question you were looking for?
It was, yes. And Heather, I don't know if you want to field that one.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking for the question. I know you just read it, but
Can I trial different
growing
methods for the
methods.
same crop?
Yeah, I guess different growing methods. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by different growing methods, but we could certainly help you sort of like flesh that question out a little bit more and come up with a trial that I'm guessing would likely meet your needs. But yeah, I think I might need a little more information, but generally speaking, yes.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
I see another one here asking you, Tiffany, how was the chicken manure collected and added to your compost and or stored?
So the chicken manure, we actually, when we cleaned out our coops, we collected the chicken manure from that, and then I added to the compost. I am assuming on the final reports, all of the methods and so forth are on there. So I cannot remember that off the top of my head. That's about been a year ago. But it was just the chicken manure from the coop.
Perfect. I see another question here that is there a minimum farm area? I only have a 1/4 acre, the norm here in San Diego County. Simon, no, there's not a minimum as long as we're able to do the trial within that space available. If that's the space you have, we're open to urban agriculture projects. Oh, thanks, Heather. I see you didn't answer that.
And then Mary, I see a question from Mark. I think I tried to forward it. I'm trying to scroll through here. It was regarding seeds. Let me try to find it here. Goodness, I sent it to you directly here. Let me know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah. And I think, and Lindsay, this is for you. So one important question is, did the shade cloth improve or deteriorate seed vigor with your germination test? And I believe you touched on that, but if you want to just say something to speak to that again, Lindsay, that would be great.
Yes, ultimately, the yields that we showed were only seeds that were viable. So, not going too much detail with like the process of processing the seeds at all. We did notice a difference in that the ones that came out of the shade trial, there were more kind of flats or empties. So the initial yield before I separated the flat ones from the full ones, the viable ones, there were like lots of seeds that hadn't fully developed in the shade. But then those get winnowed off. So after we dry them, we put them in front of a fan, the flat ones fly off and we only keep the fat, good viable ones. And so that's what I germ test. After all that, I do my germination tests in house. And so those were all good, which is kind of funny because like, yeah, essentially like I'm only going to end up with viable seed at the end, right? Like I winnow down anyway. So it was, yeah, really depends where in the process you count, doesn't it? Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, and I think you were going to put in the 2 seeds in a pod web link if you get a chance. Lindsay.
Oh, I'll do that now. Yes.
Thank you. I had a question come in, Tim and Becky. They had a question about the penetrometer. Would you all consider using that again, or do you think it was really just kind of like a faulty use for what you have? And you're on mute still, just unmute yourself.
If I were doing the same project, no, I wouldn't use it again for that. I don't think it was very beneficial. I think there's other applications that it might be useful for. Maybe if you were trialing a very specific area over and over and over again, maybe more frequently, but our trial went over a full calendar year from spring 24 to spring 25. So I think there's just too much variability in there. Maybe if you were looking at, the stages of crop growth over one crop and to see how it broke it up, that might be more effective. But I don't think the readings were precise enough, really, because like I said, it was really just like a gauge that went from green to yellow to red, showing the PSI as we push down.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. I had another one come in from registration that was asking if there was one thing you could share about what you would have told yourself before the trial that you know now. So I'll let anybody start with that one, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I'd say like keep it simple. I kind of wanted to do everything. But it was nice to sort of break it up into must and would be nice. So if you've got the time and the interest, go for it. But like make sure you have your musts that are attainable. Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah, I would say as you're thinking about your project, think about how much room it will take. So who was it that asked from San Diego County about if a quarter acre was big enough? Like, I'm looking back, I'm like, quarter acre would have been nice. Because with the data collection and what you're doing, sometimes bigger isn't necessarily better. Like if you can keep your project within a small area, it's going to make it easier on yourself in the long run, especially if you're the one doing everything. Uh, you know, you could kind of gear your project to your questions toward a smaller amount of space. I think that would be a good idea too.
I agree. Keeping it simple is definitely great. But then I also would consider definitely give yourself extra time because time is your enemy and you are always going to run out of time on something. And if you give yourself extra time and put that with your project, you're going to appreciate it in the end.
Wow. Yes. Sage-like from everyone. That was great.
Yeah, I think if I can just say, you have to think about when we look at research trials, they're generally conducted by several people who, are very well trained in this, and that is their sole focus. And so it's a huge testament to the capability and the effort of these farmer-led research trial for taking this on and seeing it through to the finish, because it's a big lift, it's a big effort, but hopefully worth it, and we're always there to support. We do try and encourage people to keep things simple.
Thanks, Heather. Wonderful. Did I miss anything else in the chat? If anybody still has any questions. It looks like I just want to make sure I didn't overlook anyone. I have one from Amanda about high tunnel versus caterpillar versus cold frame versus open air, but I'm not completely sure what that question is.
I believe that was her describing what the original question that had.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but I think that sounds like a viable project idea. So I think just either setting aside some time to talk with Mary or just refining it a little bit, but that does sound like that could be your treatment there.
Wonderful. Great. Well, I do not think we have missed anything. I do want to give one more plug, of course, to reading the guide, checking it out, reviewing it before. I remember Lindsay mentioned it in her presentation. As a participant of the farm trials, you get a hard copy, but all that great, wonderful information is available free online from our website to download. So it's all there for you in digital format. So please check it out. The application's open until December 3rd, so you've got some time to mull it over, to try it out. So please review the work there and take a look at the farm trials. That all the reports are there. You can kind of get a sense of what questions people were asking and how things were framed. And I have one last question it looks like come in is, can this project be a part of bigger research? What we're able to answer in these are like smaller frame, right, of how that's going to impact, but that doesn't mean it's not bigger than something. We did have one project our first year as well that was looking at different grain accessions. And Heather, I don't know if you want to touch on Bob Quinn's research and how that kind of played into some of his larger studies that he's done.
Yeah, so I definitely think that they can be, like Bob Quinn, he worked with us. He has sort of a very long-term research project going on, and we definitely supported him, and basically, we supported him through doing some baking tests and things like that he was doing, and helped provide some support for that with him. So it could be part of bigger research for sure. I think just maybe that might be better to just have a one-on-one conversation about whether what you have in mind, Simon Luke, is a good fit.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. Well, that about brings us to time. I want to again thank all of our farmers for their hard work, for their presentations today, for being able to share just kind of how hard it is, how like things change, how weather just has its way every time. So thank you all so much for participating, and thanks for sharing your experience here.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Tiffany. And thank you, Lindsay. And of course, Mary and Heather, because without you, we wouldn't be able to run this program at all. So this is all very exciting. I do see Mark said, can these lead to a bigger trial? Our hope is that farmers feel confident applying for funding like SARE projects, so SARE farmer grants, after getting their feet wet in some of the research world, and they feel more confident in being able to do that. So this is the first step into your journey as farmer researchers. Congratulations.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and thanks for joining us.